Good morning, everyone. We all got an hour of extra sleep, but I was wondering if the church is going to be empty today or full. And it could go either way, because either it could be empty because everyone is still lying in bed sobbing about the big loss of the Blue Jays, or everyone is going to come here because, I need some hope in the darkness, right? But I actually think the topic we're talking about today is so appropriate in the light of what happened yesterday. And so I hope it's going to encourage you today. But if I had to ask you today to measure this auditorium for us, to measure the size of the floor area, most of you would figure out a way how to do it. Most of us would go to tape measure and start measuring it out. If you're heavy into DIY or you're in construction, you would probably pull out a cool laser that you just put against one wall and it tells you how far the other one is away from you. Or if you're like Gen Z or Gen Alpha, you'd probably just take out your phone and go measure it with your phone. But we know, when I ask you to measure this space, we all know how to physically measure it. But when I ask you, how do you measure your worth? How do you measure your purpose? Then that becomes more complicated. And the reality is that there are many ways that the world measures our worth. There are many ways that we measure our own worth. And the challenge is that if we use the wrong measuring tape to measure our worth, our identities, then we start to believe lies about ourselves. And that is why we started this series last week called Who Told You That? Who told you that? This is a series where we are exposing some of the lies, some of the measures the world uses and that we use to measure ourselves, and replace it with the truth of what God says about us. Why? Because we don't want lies to have influence over us and shape what we believe about ourselves. And today, last week, we spoke about the first lie: you are what you own. And we said our identities, our value is not determined by what we possess, but by who possesses us. And today, for the second lie that we're going to expose, the second lie today is you are what you do. This is a lie where we believe that my value and my worth is directly tied to my achievements, to my successes. And this is something that is naturally kind of built into us since we're little. If you think of little children, it brings them great joy to tell you, hey, I want to be a firefighter one day, or a pilot, or an astronaut, or a nurse, or a doctor, or maybe a pastor, or a musician, or an influencer. And those are questions that we ask, that children ask, because it helps them to figure out what their purpose is in this life. But sadly, as we grow older, it starts to distort a bit, and it starts to create a false thing that we believe about ourselves. And suddenly when we're teenagers, we start seeing that when I'm successful, it earns me rewards and it earns me the esteem of others. I had a young person who told me a while ago that they constantly feel like they have to work twice as hard as everyone else to just get a seat at the table. And suddenly our young people have completely overscheduled calendars where they have to juggle trying to achieve everything in sport and in school and in the volunteer hours and in the part-time work. And they just keep going, and exhaustion becomes a badge of honor, of how much I've achieved and how much I can do. But inside, our young people are anxious and burnt out and terrified of not being enough. And then we grow up, and the question doesn't go away. We continue to work for promotions and projects and side hustles and success stories, because if I'm not as successful as others, the world will cut me off. Because I've even experienced that in my own life in church ministry. When we were planting churches in Cape Town, our first plant was in the city center. And one of the biggest challenges with city center church planting is finding venues that can accommodate the church. And we had a venue. We could only meet there at night. It was in a pretty dodgy part of town. People would literally sit outside the gate and do drugs. So we would see parents come in. They love it there, but they would never return because they felt it wasn't safe for their children. So we started realizing, hey, if we want this church plan to go on, we need to find a better venue. And we started working with estate agents. We emailed and called every school and sport club we could, and we couldn't find a venue that would accommodate us. And one, I was on a call with some of our supporting churches that supported us financially and in prayer and everything. And I was just sharing these struggles. I'm like, I don't know what we're going to do. And one of our partner churches, the person on the other side told me, Louis, no one wants to get on board a sinking ship. And those words, like they cut deep. And I was like, we're not a sinking ship. We just cannot find a venue. But it reinforced in me the idea that if I'm not as successful as people want me to be, then they'll just cut me out. And it's become standard practice in the world all around us. We live in a culture that worships busyness, right? We brag about how many hours we've worked and how little sleep we've had. We know that our value at work rises on our output, not on our character. And we feel like if I don't accomplish something, I'm falling behind. And you wonder why we cannot rest. Why we cannot take a vacation without a packed itinerary. Just go and rest like our grandparents did. Why we cannot take a Sabbath and just do nothing. You know why we cannot? Because we believe if I don't continue to perform, the world will fall apart and I will have no value. I will lose my worth. So we feel guilty for even resting. And social media turned our achievements into performance. Whether it's LinkedIn or TikTok or Instagram, it constantly reminds us of who's doing better. We don't compare ourselves anymore to the village we live in, or to the town we live in, or even to the city we live in. We constantly compare ourselves to the best in the world. We start seeing everyone's highlight reels and we assume this is just normal life, and we start performing more and more for digital applause. And the moment that a like goes away, the moment that the subscriber unsubscribes, I believe that I don't matter anymore. And as we start to talk about this topic today, I want to make this very clear first. That I am not saying today that we shouldn't work hard. I am not saying that we shouldn't have goals that we passionately pursue. I was born a visionary person. I didn't become that. I could always see a future that other people couldn't imagine. That's just the way God made me. And because of that, I always had this drive to achieve something. So I'm not saying it is wrong. The Bible tells us God made us for a purpose. He made us to work, to be productive, to do good works. So I'm not saying today as we go into this, you shouldn't work, you should be lazy and just sit around. But what I am saying is that when achievement becomes our identity, our work stops giving us life and it starts draining the life out of us. And before we know it, our achievements, our successes becomes the measuring tape with which we measure our worth and our value. Jesus also faced this, and last week we started reading about the temptation of Jesus in the wilderness, and I said we're going to read this for 3 weeks. So before Jesus starts his public ministry, he's in the wilderness, he fasts for 40 days to prepare himself for the purpose that his Father sent him to earth for. And in that time, the devil tempts Jesus with 3 different questions. And last week, we read from Matthew 4, the first temptation. But it's interesting, both in Matthew 4 and in Luke 4, we read the account of the temptation. But Matthew and Luke, they give the 3 same temptations, but they swap the order of number 2 and 3. So today we are jumping to Luke. Last week we were in Matthew. This week we're in Luke. To Luke 4 verse 5. And we're going to read about the second temptation. The first temptation, turn stones into bread. The devil told Jesus that if he just owns more stuff, he will be the Son of God. He will be better. But today, verse 5, let's read what the second temptation is. The devil led Jesus up to a high place. And he showed him in an instant all of the kingdoms of the world. And he said to him, I will give you all their authority and splendor because it's been given to me and I can give it to anyone I want to. If you worship me, it will all be yours. But Jesus answered, it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. So I want you to see here that the devil doesn't start with an innocent question. What does he go after again? The first thing he goes after is Jesus' identity. If you are the Son of God, if you truly have purpose, if you truly are who you say you are. And then he comes with the secondary lie. So he first pulls identity into question, and then he comes with the second lie. Have you really achieved enough? Have you achieved everything you're supposed to achieve? Have you done enough? And he tries to tempt Jesus with quick successes and with achievements. And he says he can help Jesus to achieve everything he desires, to make him successful in an instant. Because let's be honest, part of the reason why Jesus came was to rule, right? To rule and to reign over everything. And the devil is like, listen, you don't have to go through all the suffering. You don't have to wait. I can just give you it in an instant, and you can quickly achieve success. And at the end of the day, although this seems like a quick success is what would be good in the moment, what he's actually trying to do is he's trying to derail the ultimate purpose of Jesus with quick achievements and rewards. He promises Jesus something that the Father already promised Jesus, but he promises it without the waiting, without the cross, without the cost. He's basically saying, Jesus, I can offer you success, I can offer you the crown, but without the cross. And the devil still uses the same question against us. He still constantly whispers in our ear, what are you here to do? Have you done enough? Have you achieved enough? Are you truly successful? And this is a super deep identity forming question, because it doesn't only shape how we measure ourselves and how we position ourselves in this world, but it constantly tells us that our worth depends on our work. And here's the problem. When you define yourself by what you achieve, you cannot win. When you define yourself by what you achieve, you cannot win, whether you win or lose. And there's two reasons for it. And the first reason has everything to do with relationships. Because if we define ourselves by what we achieve, it always puts us in competition with other people. Think about it for a moment, okay? You are a hyper-driven person, you succeed and you achieve everything you want. What does that lead to? Pride. It leads me to a sense of superiority. I'm better than everyone else. And then I become a nasty person to be around. There are stories all over the world of people like that who achieved seemingly incredible things, who designed cell phones and computers that we all use today. But you listen to interviews with people and they're like, this person was nasty to work with. It wasn't nice. So you win by achieving certain things, but you lose relationships around you. You lose connection around you. But let's look at the other side. You don't achieve everything you want. You are not successful. What does that lead to? It leads to inferiority. I feel inferior to everyone else, so I start looking at the people around me, and I start feeling bitter. Because why does everyone get a break? Why is everyone doing better? Why do I always have to draw on the short straw? So even when I don't win, even when I lose extra. I don't only lose in successes and achievements in work, I still lose in relationships. And maybe you're hearing like, I'm so thankful I'm retired. Like my life isn't driven by what I do anymore. If our achievements, if that is what we base our identity on, even if you're retired, it still holds us captive. Because now you look back at your life and you either see everything you won or you see everything that you didn't win, that you lost. But there is a trail of broken relationships behind you. And you live with regret. God made us to love Him. That's the big commandment. Love God with everything you are, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. We were made to live in relationship. And when achievement is our driver, it puts us against everyone else. So even if you win, you lose in relationships. But the second reason why we can never win is because there is always more than can be achieved. Think about it. No matter how fast you run, you're probably not going to outrun Usain Bolt. But even if he holds the record, someone else is going to break the record. And even if you're like, okay, he's not my competition, I'm my own competition. When are you running fast enough? When do you know this was enough? There's always more than we can achieve. There's never an end. And when self-worth depends on achievement, suddenly every single failure that we experience in life becomes the end of me. I lose my value. So suddenly I don't want to do anything that I can fail in. I start hiding my weaknesses. And here's the problem. If you never do anything that you could possibly fail in, you might lose out on the very things and avoid the very things that you were created to do. The philosopher Erich Hoffer wrote, he said, we are warned not to waste time, but we were brought up to waste our lives. We don't want to waste time. We need to get as much done as we possibly can. We need to chase the achievements, but we look back and we wasted our lives and we lost out on the most important things in life. See, you cannot win if achievement shapes your identity, your worth. Because the lie tells us that achievement will give your life meaning. But the only thing it does, it adds more pressure. It adds pressure to your relationships. It adds pressure to achieving more. You cannot win. Achievement culture doesn't create peace. It creates exhaustion. It creates anxiety. It creates emptiness, both in relationship and in purpose. And when the devil comes to Jesus and he offers Jesus quick and easy success and achievement, Jesus says no. Why? Because Jesus knows that success without relationship and purpose is worthless. Hear the answer that Jesus gives the devil. He says, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. Do you see that? Worship the Lord your God. Relationship and serve him only. Purpose. Not achievement, the purpose that he made me for. And Jesus is quoting here from the Old Testament again, from Deuteronomy 6, verse 13, where God is warning the Israelites, you're going into the land of milk and honey. You're going into the land of success and opportunities and achievement. In all of that, do not forget who I am. Do not forget to place me first. Do not forget to worship God above it all. It's because God knew, for both the Israelites and Jesus knew this in his own heart, that we can get so caught up in what we do that we can forget where we're going, who we're becoming, and why we've been placed on earth. Jesus didn't fall for the quick satisfaction and then missed his greater purpose on earth. He could have said, yes, let me rule and reign over everything. But he would have missed the purpose of why God sent him here. Success without purpose and the right relationships is worthless. And Paul picks up on this when he writes to the church in Colossians 3, verse 23 to 24. Hear this. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart. Don't be half-hearted. Give everything. Why? For achievement, for success, for the approval of people? He says, no. Work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as reward. It is the Lord Christ you're serving. I thought I'm working for my boss. I thought I'm working for the government or for the city. It's like, no, you're serving Jesus. You see, we should absolutely, as Christians, give our best in everything. We should not be the ones who's ever called a slacker. We should not be the ones who try to give the bare minimum and just make it through. We should be wholeheartedly into everything we do, because we do it for God, not for applause, not for achievement. We work with passion because we're serving a God who made us for purpose. And it's our relationship with God that fuels our passion. It is not achievement, it's not reward, it's not the applause of people. It's not the need to succeed that drives us, it's the love for the one we serve. And that relationship with God keeps everything else in its appropriate place. It's when we break that relationship that everything else falls apart. When I stop seeing my work as purpose that I can live out, but I start seeing it as the need to form value, as the need to gain worth in my own life. So purpose is not found in what you achieve, but purpose is found in who you serve. And the beautiful thing is, if it's not about what I achieve, but about who I serve, when you live like that, even if you fail, it cannot derail you. Because failure doesn't define me. Failure doesn't define my purpose. And it doesn't change my relationship with the one who created me. And sometimes it is hard when we talk about stuff like this to bring a spiritual reality and a very practical matter together. And it might seem to you like, hey, I just said, don't work for success, don't work for achievement and for the approval and applause of other people. And you might be like, but Louis, if I'm working to please God, isn't it the same drive but just a different crowd? Isn't it the same thing? You know why we think that way? Why we think that we need to also gain the approval of God? Because at some point, we do still in the deepest part of our beings believe the same lie. That we are what we do. That we are what we achieve. But who told you that? The church? Your parents? Your teachers? Your coach? The world around you? It is a lie that is not from God. And the gospel of Jesus, the good news of Jesus, flips that script. It gives us a different picture. It says something radically different. The gospel tells us that your value is not found in what you do, but in what Jesus has already achieved for you, in what Jesus has already done for you. You see, here's the beauty. Jesus didn't die for you because you achieved it or because you deserve it. Jesus didn't die for you because you've done enough good in your life. Jesus died for you despite your achievements and your good works. And there is very few texts in the Bible that says it as clearly as Ephesians 2 verse 8. Hear this. God saved you by His grace when you believed. It doesn't say, God saved you after you have attended church enough. It doesn't say, God saved you after you have fed enough hungry people. It doesn't say, God saved you after you have accumulated enough volunteer hours. It says He saved you by His grace when you believed. And just in case you missed this, it says, and guess what? You cannot take credit for it. It's a gift from God. Guys, as a pastor, I want to tell you that my bad always outweighs my good. Always. I cannot get my good to such a high place that it outweighs my bad. And that is why it says, like, I can't take credit for this. This is from God. Salvation, it says in verse 9, is not a reward for the good things we have done, so that, why? So that you cannot boast about it, for we are God's masterpiece. And hear this, He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things He planned for us long ago. Why do we keep basing our sense of worth on what we've done? Why do we base our sense of heaven and of God on what we've done? I get so frustrated and tired when I speak to Christians that grew up in church and I say, why should God allow you into heaven? And they're like, because I have done good things. Because I fed the hungry. That is not why. That's not what the Bible teaches us. It's not about your confessions. It is not about the church you belong to. It is not about your works. It's about His grace that is enough. It's about what He has achieved for you. See, you might try to prove yourself, and you might try to continuously try to earn God's love, to earn God's respect, to perform for His approval. But grace says you don't work for love. You work from love. Small word, but total different opposite worlds. Christians don't strive to earn a reward. We serve because we already have a reward. And I don't have to succeed to be accepted. I'm accepted so that I can freely serve. And I know sometimes for us, when we talk about something that's so practical and so deeply embedded in our culture, and then I talk about a Christian spiritual reality that is so deeply spiritual that it feels like it's these two opposite worlds, this practical real life and the super deep spiritual alternative, that we struggle to bring the two together. And I want to help to make this as simple as possible for you today by a simple illustration. This is my daughter's report card. She goes here to Newmarket Christian Academy, and love that she's there because it reinforces the values that we teach her of Christianity. But a couple of times a year we get this report card. And this tells us everything about her successes, about her achievements, about her performance. And it also tells us everything about her failures. And each time I get this, I eagerly read this because I care about her effort. And I care about her learning. But no matter what's written on this piece of paper, it does not change my love for her. Because her grades doesn't define her worth. Her grades defines her work, not her worth. And your work and your successes and your achievements doesn't define your worth. It only defines your work. So your performance, stop believing that it defines you. It doesn't. God's grace has already defined you. And we're going to take a moment to respond to that today, because I said last week, I want us, and I truly believe in this series, the Holy Spirit is up to something and He wants to do something. But I believe in a series like this, it's important for us to not just hear this, but for this to sink into the depths of our souls where it becomes the foundation of our lives. Maybe today you're sitting here and you've been carrying this weight deep inside of you where you're constantly trying to prove yourself to people, to yourself, and even to God. When Jesus went to the cross, He didn't just die for what you've done. He didn't just die for your brokenness, for your past, for your sin. Jesus also died so that you and I can be free from this need that we feel that we have to keep proving ourselves. And today, we're going to take communion together. And communion is a reminder that we don't have to strive, that we don't need to perform. The striving can stop. Because when we take that piece of bread together, it reminds us that the body of Jesus was broken so that I can be made whole. And when I take the juice, that cup, it reminds me that His blood was spilled so that I can be forgiven and set free. And we're going to take communion in a minute, but communion is for Christians. So if you're not sure about Jesus yet, if you're not a Christian yet, then I want to ask you to not take communion with us. But I want to ask you to, where you are in this next moment, to still sit in the presence of God and reach out to Him. Say, God, if you're real, Jesus, if you truly love me this way, reveal it to me. Give your striving, give your need for performance to Him. And receive what He wants to give you. And if you are a Christian, take that bread today, take that cup, and remember what He's done for you. Luke 22 verse 19, we read the night before Jesus was arrested, He took bread, He gave thanks, and He broke it. And He gave it to His disciples, saying, "This is my body given for you. Do this, take this, eat this in remembrance of me." And then in the same way, after the supper, He took the cup, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you." That's grace. Not what we do, but what He's done for us. So I'm going to pray for us in a moment, but what we're going to do is music will play, Etienne is going to sing a song for us, and this is going to be a moment where you can sit in the presence of the living God, and where you can surrender your striving and your performance and your successes and your need for approval and just receive what He has. And we're not going to take communion together as we normally do. You have that with you, that little cup with you. Has anyone been skipped with it? Does anyone still need a communion pack? Can you just raise your hand? Just keep it raised. Our ushers are coming. And while this song is playing, I'm not going to announce it. When you have spent time in communion with your Father, with Jesus, you're going to open that and you're going to take that piece of bread and remember what His broken body. And you're going to take that cup and you're going to remember His blood that was spilled. Let's just pray. Then I'm going to hand over to the band. And we are just going to sit in the presence of God. Jesus, thank You that in You, we don't have to continue to strive to try and gain God's approval. We don't need to work for successes, because in You, everything we need has been achieved. I pray today as we sit here, may we surrender our need to prove ourselves, to find worth in what we do. And may we just receive the worth that You have given us through what You've achieved on the cross. Holy Spirit, I pray that You would fill this place. That in these moments that we would be in Your presence. And that this head knowledge would sink deep into our hearts and gain a hold of our entire being. I pray it in Jesus' name.